Welcome to TED Guide to Public Speaking Part 2. In this video, we'll learn how to prepare, structure, and deliver your TED Talk. Just to remind you that this is not an instruction, this is the toolkit. It can help you to find the right presentation style that works for you. But if you already have one, don't overcomplicate things. Don't try to copy someone else's style. Just be the first you. Focus on your content and your passion. Give your talk in your own way. Let's look at each of these elements separately. The first element that we're going to talk about is preparation. If you fail to prepare, prepare to fail. It is a very accurate statement. In this section, we'll talk about two things: audience and idea. The first step in your preparation process is to find out as much as you can about the audience. Every piece of communication begins with the audience. If you don't know whom are you speaking to, how do you know what will inspire them? Ask yourself, who is my audience? How knowledgeable they are? What do they know about my topic? What are their expectations? What have past speakers spoken about? What are their attitudes? For example, if you are going to speak in front of taxi drivers in London about the amazingness of sharing economy, it would be helpful to know in advance that their lives are being destroyed by Uber. In order to build your idea inside minds of your audience, don't forget to use language of your audience. I mean, all technical terms or acronyms that might be unfamiliar to your listeners should be eliminated or explained. Nothing frustrates an audience more than to hear a 3-minute speech about TLAs when they have no idea what TLAs are. If people don't understand what you're talking about, they simply switch off. Your role is avoided by any means. I'm not saying that everything should be explained on a level appropriate for 6th graders, but make everything as simple as it can be, but not simpler. Now we're moving to the next subtopic, which is idea building. Idea truly matters. The only thing that truly matters in public speaking is not confidence, stage presence, or smooth talking. It's having something worth saying. It doesn't have to be scientific breakthrough or invention, it can be a simple how-to. I assume that if you watch this video, you have something that is worth sharing. Are you still working on developing your idea? Here is a simple checklist. Is this topic I'm passionate about? Does it inspire curiosity? Will it make a difference to the audience to have this knowledge? Is the information fresh, or it is already out there? Can I truly explain the topic in the time slot allocated, complete with necessary examples? Do I know enough about this to make a talk worth the audience time? What are the 15 words that summarizes my talk? If you feel comfortable with these questions, so you have really strong idea. We have finished the first topic, which is preparation, and let's move to the structure. It's not a secret that structure plays a very important role, because people recall information better by 40% when it's delivered in a structured and coherent way. Different talks can have very different structures. I will show you a few examples of structures that you might use, but I would not recommend that you need to adopt exactly the same structure. What matters is that you find the structure that most powerfully reveals your idea in the time that you have. There are 3 types of structures that I want to talk about. The first one is very simple. It is called chronological structure. This structure can be used to explain any sort of progress by telling what was in the past, how things are now, and what is expected in the future. The second type of structure is problem-solution benefits. You can replace problem with opportunity and use the same structure. Talk about opportunity, what is required to execute it, and what will be the benefits. Or you talk about problem, then you provide solution, and then you talk about benefits. The third structure is like old formula for writing essays that says that good essay answer 3 questions. What, so what, now what? As simple as that. Let's take a minute and dig into what, so what, and now what structure. Full version of it looks like this. You start with introducing the concept, explain to the audience why it matters, describe the main concepts, provide examples of practical implications, and conclude your speech with powerful ending. Structures help you to formulate your thoughts, but to say something interesting, you have to take the time to do at least two things. Show why it matters. What's the question you are trying to answer? The problem you are trying to solve, the experience you are trying to share. Flesh out each point you make with the real examples, stories, and facts. And from here, we're moving to the third part of this presentation called delivery. Once you have general vision of your talk, let's look at public speaking tools that you can attach to your talk in order to make your speech perfect. In this part, we'll look at the tools that will help you to build trustworthy relations with your audience. These tools will let your audience trust you and believe you. It's not only about delivery, it's about content as well. Many centuries ago, Aristotle claimed that in order to persuade your listener, you should use pathos, ethos, and logos in your speech. Modern science of communication says that the most effective and persuasive speech is the one that contains 65% of pathos, 25% of logos, and 10% of ethos. What on earth does it mean? Ethos is trust. It is connection you build between you and your audience. In order to believe you, people must trust you. You can build this trust by using effective body language, humor, or eye contact. This is our nature, our biology. We believe a person who is not aggressive, who has good sense of humor, and who is looking at your eyes when he is speaking. But you cannot persuade your audience by relying only on trust. That's why it's only 10%. Logos, it is statistics, data, and facts that you use. Numbers don't lie, and in order to prove your idea, you should provide scientifically proven evidence, but still, it's only 25%. Pathos. This is the most important component. It means emotions. Emotions reach people's hearts, while facts might not. Persuasion may come when the speech awakes emotions. It is a very human thing. Let's look at each element separately and watch examples. We start with ethos, in other words, trust. Trust is a very intangible thing, and here you should be very careful with this. You should let the audience trust you. Eye contact builds trust more than anything else, because we have a perception that it is difficult to tell a lie by looking at someone else's eyes. If we look at someone's eyes and speak, this person believes us. Great speakers find a way of making an early connection with their audience. It can be as simple as walking confidently on stage, looking around, making eye contact with 2 or 3 people, and smiling. How to use eye contact effectively during your speech? Just remember a simple formula. Look, talk, and pause. Lock your eyes by looking at one person. Your task is to talk to one person in a group. It doesn't matter how many people are sitting there. You should talk to one person only. Your speech is a series of one-to-one conversations. After you complete your conversation, you pause and move to the next person, and repeat the same process. Lock eyes, talking for at least 5 seconds, and then pause, and repeat this again.
I have a confession to make. But first, I want you to make a little confession to me. In the past year, I want you to just raise your hand if you've experienced relatively little stress. Anyone? How about a moderate amount of stress? Who's experienced a lot of stress? Yeah, me too. But that is not my confession. My confession is this: I'm a health psychologist, and my mission is to help people be happier and healthier. But I fear that something I've been teaching for the last 10 years is doing more harm than good, and it has to do with stress. For years, I've been telling people stress makes you sick. It increases the risk of everything from the common cold to cardiac.
It was a very good example. You could notice that she had instant connection with the audience and effectively used formula lock, pause, and talk. Now we're moving to the next powerful tool, how to let the audience trust you. It's humor. Humor is a wonderful way to bring the audience with you. When people laugh with you, you both feel that you're on the same side. It's a fantastic tool for building a connection. Indeed, for many great speakers, humor has become a superpower. However, it's very risky. It's a very risky tool because sometimes what you think is funny isn't funny to other people. There is nothing worse than tell a joke and having no response. It would push you back and would need some recovery. Ineffective humor is worse than no humor at all. Therefore, I recommend you that you test your jokes in advance. Ask yourself, is it funny? How do I know that? Test it on someone before you tell it to the audience. What is a backup plan if it doesn't work? If you still worry about answer 1 and answer 2, don't use humor at all. Anyway, I recommend you to have a funny remark ready if, for example, the clicker doesn't work. Let's move to the next tool, body language. It is a very powerful tool, but the truth is that there are no rules here. The last thing that I want to prescribe a single approach to body language. Talks would quickly get boring if every speaker did the same thing. The simplest way to give a talk powerfully is just to stand tall, putting equal weight on both feet, and use your hands and arms to naturally amplify whatever you are saying. You can turn a little, but you don't have to walk. You may if you want, but this is not necessary. Some speakers prefer to work on stage. It helps them to think. It helps them emphasize key moments. This can work well too, provided that walking is relaxed, not forced. In summary, move if you want to, but if you do move, move intentionally. A few things to avoid is. So you should avoid the following. Don't put both of your hands in pockets. Avoid nervously shifting from leg to leg or walking forward and back a couple of steps in a kind of rocking motion. From audience's viewpoint, it highlights the discomfort you are experiencing. In summary, there are no rules here. Just find a mode of being on stage in which you are comfortable and confident and which doesn't detract from what you are saying. Let's take a look at the first 3 minutes of Ernesto's Ciroli speech, which is, I think, really a great example of using humor and body language.
Everything I do and everything I do professionally, my life has been shaped by 7 years of work as a young man in Africa. From 1971 to 1977, I look young, but I'm not. I worked in Zambia, Kenya, Ivory Coast, Algeria, Somalia, in projects of technical cooperation with African countries. I worked for an Italian NGO. And every single project that we set up in Africa failed. And I was distraught. I thought, age 21, that we Italians were good people and we were doing good work in Africa. Instead, everything we touched, we killed. Our first project, the one that has inspired my first book, Ripples from the Zambezi, was a project where we Italians decided to teach Zambian people how to grow food. So we arrived there with Italian seeds in southern Zambia, in this absolutely magnificent valley going down to the Zambezi River, and we taught the local people how to grow Italian tomatoes and zucchini. And of course, the local people had absolutely no interest in doing that, so we paid them to come and work, and sometimes they would show up. And we were amazed that the local people in such fertile valley would not have any agriculture. But instead of asking them how come they were not growing anything, we simply said, thank God we're here. Just in the nick of time to save the Zambian people from starvation. And of course, everything in Africa grew beautifully, and we had these magnificent tomatoes. In Italy, a tomato would grow to this size, in Zambia to this size. And we could not believe. And we were telling the Zambians, look how easy agriculture is. When the tomatoes were nice and ripe and red, overnight, some 200 hippos came out from the river, and they ate everything. And we said to the Zambians, my God, the hippos! And the Zambia said, yes, that's why we have no agriculture here. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked. I thought it was only us Italians blundering around Africa, but then I saw what the Americans were doing, what the English were doing, what the French were doing, and after seeing what they were doing, I became quite proud of our project in Zambia, because you see, at least we fed the hippos. You should see the rubbish. You should see the rubbish that we have bestowed on unsuspecting African people. You want to read the book? Read Dead Aid by Dambisa Moyo, Zambian woman economist. The book was published in...
Personally, I think that's a great example of how to use humor and your body language effectively. We finished with ethos, which is, as we said, trust, practically eye contact, humor, and body language. And we are moving to logos, which is facts, numbers, data, and statistics. In order to persuade your audience, it is good to support your arguments with numbers, statistics, and data. The problem is how to present this data effectively in the way that everyone sitting in the room would understand. I mentioned before that you should avoid acronyms and technical terms, or at least explain it to your audience. I want to add one more circle here, which says avoid complex data, which basically means that if you present any sort of statistic or make numbers, make sure that this data is easily understood by your audience. These are a couple of tricks that you can use. Use simple but impressive phrases. For example, instead of saying, over 2.5 billion people today in the world don't have a proper access to water and sanitation. Say it differently, like this. Today, every third individual living in the world doesn't have access to water. Can you imagine? 3 out of 10 people in the world are suffering from diseases caused due to improper sanitation. Next tip is visualize using objects. For example, let's assume that I speak about my startup business, which is selling pens to school. I'm making this up, so that's an unreal example, but still. I can say, last year I sold 73 billion pens. Or I can say, last year I sold 73 billion pens. If I put all these pens in one line, the length of this line will be enough to go to the moon and come back to the Earth 10 times. Generally speaking, whatever numbers you use in your talk, make it simple for the audience to understand that. So let's look at a few videos and learn from the best how we can present data effectively so that everybody in the room can understand that.
When we do these kind of things, when 300 million people do unconscious behaviors, then it can add up to a catastrophic consequence that nobody wants and no one intended. And that's what I look at with my photographic work. This is an image I just recently completed that is, when you stand back at a distance, it looks like some kind of neo-Gothic cartoon image of a factory spewing out pollution. And as you get a little bit closer, it starts looking like lots of pipes, like maybe a chemical plant or a refinery or maybe a hellish freeway interchange. And as you get all the way up close, you realize that it's actually made of lots and lots of plastic cups. And in fact, this is 1 million plastic cups, which is the number of plastic cups that are used on airline flights in the United States every 6 hours. We use 4 million cups a day on airline flights, and virtually none of them are reused or recycled. They just don't do that in that industry. Now that number is dwarfed by the number of paper cups we use every day. And that is 40 million cups a day for hot beverages, most of which is coffee. I couldn't fit 40 million cups on a canvas, but I was able to put 410,000. That's what 410,000 cups looks like. That's 15 minutes of our cup consumption. And if you could actually stack up that many cups in real life, that's the size it would be. And there's an hour's worth of our cups. And there's a day's worth of our cups. You can still see the little people way down there. That's as high as a 42-story building. And I put the Statue of Liberty in there as a scale reference. Speaking of justice, there's another phenomenon going on in our culture that I find deeply troubling, and that is that America right now has the largest percentage of its population in prison of any country on earth. 1 out of 4 people, 1 out of 4 humans in prison are Americans in prison in our country. And I wanted to show the number. The number is 2.3 million Americans were incarcerated in 2005, and that's gone up since then, but we don't have the numbers yet. So I wanted to show 2.3 million prison uniforms. And in the actual print of this piece, each uniform is the size of a nickel on its edge. They're tiny. They're barely visible as a piece of material. And to show 2.3 million of them required a canvas that was larger than any printer in the world would print. And so I had to divide it up into multiple panels that are 10 feet tall by 25 feet wide. This is that piece installed in a gallery in New York. Those are my parents looking at the piece. Every time I look at this piece, I always wonder if my mom's whispering to my dad, he finally folded his laundry.
So I think that this is really good example how you can use ratios. That much per day, that much per minute, that much per year, and so on and so forth. And also, this is very good example how to illustrate that effectively. Using objects that everybody understands, using pictures, and using digital platforms. Now let's look at another very good example of how to present data and statistics.
So telling us is that the long, slow journey, humanity's long, slow journey of equality is actually speeding up. Look at what's being achieved. Look at the pictures these data sets print. Since the year 2000, since the turn of the millennium, there are 8 million more AIDS patients getting life-saving antiretroviral drugs. Malaria, there are 8 countries in sub-Saharan Africa that have their death rates cut by 75%. For kids under 5, child mortality, kids under 5, it's down by 2.65 million a year. That's a rate of 7,256 children's lives saved each day. Wow. Wow. Let's just stop for a second, actually, and think about that. Have you read anything, anywhere in the last week that is remotely as important as that number? Wow. Great news. It drives me nuts that most people don't seem to know this news. 7,000 kids a day. Here's 2 of them. This is Michael and Benedicta. And they're alive, thanks in large part to Dr. Patricia Asamoah. She's amazing.
That's truly impressive numbers, and also the way of presenting it was very, very effective. I also want to show you another example. This guy is Hans Rosling, and he talks about population growth, and the way he does it is really impressive. Let's look at that.
Technology, as I've done during my first 5 TED Talks. Instead, I have progressed, and I am today launching a brand new analog teaching technology that I picked up from IKEA. This box contains 1 billion people. And our teacher told us that the industrialized world, 1960, had 1 billion people. And the developing world, she said, they had 2 billion people. And they lived away then. There was a big gap between the 1 billion in the industrialized world and the 2 billion in the developing world. The industrialized world, people were healthy, educated, rich, and they had small families. And their aspiration was to buy a car. And in 1960, all Swedes were saving to try to buy a Volvo like this. This was the economic level at which Sweden was. But in contrast to this, the developing world, far away, the aspiration of the average family there was to have food for the day. And they were saving to be able to buy a pair of shoes. There was an enormous gap in the world when I grew up. And this gap between the West and the rest has created a mindset of the world which we still use linguistically when we talk about the West and the developing world. But the world has changed, and it's overdue to upgrade that mindset and that taxonomy of the world and to understand it. And that's what I'm going to show you. Because since 1960, what has happened in the world up to 2010 is that a staggering 4 billion people have been added to the world population. Just look how many. The world population has doubled since I went to school. And
We watched these examples, which are really good examples, about how to present your data and complex statistics using simple but impressive ratios, or visualize using objects and providing some analogy. Now we are moving to the most important ingredient called pathos. Pathos means emotions. Emotions reach people's hearts while facts might not. I mentioned that. Persuasion may come when the speech awakes emotions. It is a very human thing. Practically, it means that you start with a powerful hook to grab attention of your audience. How you end your speech is also important. And the most remarkable component is the storytelling. Include a real-life story in your speech, because people like stories. We as human beings remember stories and anecdotes more than anything else, more than numbers and facts. That's how our brain works. Let's look at that. At the beginning of your talk, you have about a minute to tease your audience with what you are willing to say. It's very important to pay attention to how you begin and how you end your speech as well. Let's first look and learn a few ways how to start strong. Depending on your topic, you can start with asking a question. For example, have you ever heard this and that? How many of you are, and then you ask, how many of you have ever, and you continue. When you see this, what do you think? And show a glorious, impactful, or exciting picture or video. There is nothing wrong to start your presentation by showing an appealing slide, video, or object. Depending on what material you have, there are plenty of ways to start. For example, the image you are about to see changed my life. Or, I'm going to play a video that at first viewing may seem to be impossible. Another way to start strong is to intrigue people by telling the facts that shocks. Of course, it should be relevant to your presentation. For example, there are more people alive today than have ever died. I'm interested. I personally think that the best way to start is by telling your personal story. One of TED speakers started like this: "I'm not drunk, but the doctor who delivered me was." That's really interesting, right? Or another example: 20 years ago I did something that I regret, something that I'm not particularly proud of. In the late 1980s, I went to law school. Or another example: "Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you a story that's never been told before," and then you continue. So you should understand that everybody likes stories. It touches feelings more than anything else. So let me summarize. If you want to start strong, you can start by asking a question, tell the fact that shocks, show a compelling slide, video, or object, or just start from your story straight away. Touch feelings of your audience. It's very important to end with power either. But first I want to show you a few examples of how not to end your speech. So, for example, "Well, that's my time gone, so I'll wrap up there." You mean you had a lot more to say, but can't tell us because of bad planning? Finally, I just want to thank my awesome team who are pictured there, also my university sponsors, and so on. That's lovely. But do you care about them more than your idea and more than us, your audience? Thanks for being such an amazing audience. I've loved every moment standing here, talking to you, and etc. Yeah. But this is not Grammy ceremony. Simple thank you would have been more just enough. I'll close with this video which summarizes my points. No, don't do that. Never end with a video. End with you. We come to see you. Here are a few better ways to end. First way is call to action. If you have given your audience a powerful idea, why not end by asking them to act on that? Let's look one example.
The great thing about social media was how it gave a voice to voiceless people, but we're now creating a surveillance society where the smartest way to survive is to go back to being voiceless. Let's not do that. Thank you.
Let's not do that. Thank you. Really good ending. Second way is personal commitment. Making a giant commitment is a very inspiring ending of your talk. Let's look at example.
And acceptance are necessary, but that ocean's still there. This hope is still alive. And I don't want to be the crazy woman who does it for years and years and years and tries and fails and tries and fails and tries and fails, but I can swim from Cuba to Florida, and I will swim from Cuba to Florida. Thank you.
The third option how you can end your speech with power is sharing your values and vision. Let's watch one video.
That's what we do. Teaching and learning should bring joy. How powerful would our world be if we had kids who were not afraid to take risks, who were not afraid to think, and who had a champion? Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Is this job tough? You betcha. Oh God, you betcha. But it is not impossible. We can do this. We're educators. We're born to make a difference. Thank you so much.
We can do this. It is not impossible. Yeah, it was really inspiring and hopeful vision. So whichever way you choose to end, make sure it's planned. An elegant closing paragraph followed by a simple thank you. Now we are moving to the most powerful tool, which is storytelling. And it is no surprise to discover that many of the best talks are armed with stories. Why? The answer is very simple. Listening to stories is physically feeling what main character feels, and that makes us care about the outcome. Our attention is held, we're wondering about the conclusion of it. Therefore, make your speech meaningful. Tell a story. Remember to emphasize 4 key themes. Base it on a character your audience can empathize with. Build tensions, whatever through curiosity, social intrigue, or actual danger. Offer the right level of detail. Too little and the story is not vivid. Too much and it gets bogged. End with a satisfying resolution, whether funny, moving, or revealing. Many speakers use a speaking slot to share their own story. It is the simplest, easiest to prepare type of talk. And it is comfortable because you know your story. You certainly know more about it, more than anyone in the audience. If your journey has been remarkable, so this type of talk can work really well. So let's recap on the structure, content, and delivery. Assuming that you want to build your talk based on what, so what, now what structure. You start with introduction where you use a powerful hook to ignite curiosity. After that, explain the context, why this issue matters, and main concept. You may use videos, pictures, tell shocking facts, or share your personal story. To prove your idea, you can explain practical implications of your idea. To do so, provide some data, statistics, and examples. Lastly, finish your talk with a strong conclusion. It can be call to action, personal commitment, or sharing values and vision. Don't forget that you have all chances to persuade your audience with your ideas if your talk contains ethos, pathos, and logos. Put all things together and you will nail it. A few watch-outs that you need to think about before you actually come on stage. First of all, be careful with your language. Don't use repeatedly phrases, or words like. Try not to start your sentence with so. When we speak, usually we do it a lot. We say, so, I want to say that, so, as you see, it looks that you want to buy time for yourself. Just pause for a second and continue your main idea. Speak in the range of 130-170 words per minute. That's considered as natural conversation pace, which is comfortable for both speakers and audience. Talk within time limit. If you overrun with your time, it can be a big stress for you and your audience. Good advice here is prepare a talk that is no more than 90% of your time limit. If technology doesn't work, have a backup plan. Everything can happen. It's better to be proactively prepared for such situations. Stay natural and be yourself. Don't try to be someone else. Focus on your content and your passion. And don't be afraid to let your personality shine through. Thank you for being with me, and good luck with your TED Talk.